The plane spiraled out of control at 15,000 feet. The pilot froze, but a 6-year-old girl took over and changed everything. Flight Axiom 394 took off from Valemont International Airport under calm skies, bound for the coastal city of New Bellington. Among the 173 passengers was co-pilot Eric Dawson, a 34-year-old with sandy hair, sea-green eyes, and a growing sense of imposter syndrome he hid beneath his crisp blue uniform. He was joined in the cockpit by Captain Neil Harrington, 58, a silver-haired veteran whose calm demeanor had become legendary among crew members. In seat 14B, Lila Foster swung her legs back and forth beneath the tray table. The 6-year-old wore a pink dinosaur hoodie over jean overalls, her skin a soft olive tone that glowed under the cabin lights. Her eyes, wide with wonder, darted across the window as clouds rolled by. Her mother, Dr. Hannah Foster, sat beside her, flipping through a journal filled with flight diagrams. Lila's fascination with planes wasn't recent. Hannah had built a full cockpit simulator in their garage, not as a toy, but as a bonding project after Lila's father passed away 2 years prior. That little simulator, complete with glowing dials and voice prompts, had unknowingly prepared Lila for the unthinkable. Roughly an hour into the flight, the cabin crew began distributing drinks. Lila Foster, the 6-year-old girl in the pink dinosaur hoodie, leaned over to her mother, Dr. Hannah Foster, and asked, "When do we get to see the clouds from above again?" Her hazel eyes sparkled, and she gripped her stuffed monkey tightly, her small olive-toned face pressed against the window. In the cockpit, co-pilot Eric Dawson scanned the monitors. He was 34 years old with short sandy hair and tired sea-green eyes that carried the weight of self-doubt. He noticed a strange reading on the hydraulic pressure gauge. Captain Neil Harrington, tall with silver hair and weathered features, rubbed his temple and asked for a systems check. A jolt suddenly rocked the aircraft. Passengers gasped. Lila looked up, clutching her monkey tighter. Hannah, her 35-year-old mother with dark hair tied in a bun and a flight safety instinct wired into her bones, immediately grabbed the safety card from the seat pocket. "Just turbulence," Harrington muttered, but he didn't sound confident. Moments later, his speech slurred mid-sentence. He slumped sideways in his seat. Eric's breath caught in his throat. "Captain," no response. Harrington's face had gone pale. Eric activated the oxygen mask for his captain and switched to manual control. His hands shook. Outside, storm clouds brewed rapidly, unexpected and uncharted. The intercom buzzed. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing minor technical difficulties. Please remain seated." It was a lie, and he knew it. The plane began to dip. Not a steady descent, but a lurch, a free fall that made seatbelts strain and luggage bins pop. People screamed. Some cried. The flight attendants, barely holding on, tried to calm the chaos. Lila, still strapped in her seat beside her mother, looked around wide-eyed but not hysterical. Her 6-year-old face remained focused, brows set in concentration rather than fear. She gripped her stuffed monkey tighter and said, "Mommy, that sound wasn't in our simulator." Hannah Foster, her olive skin pale now and knuckles white from gripping the armrests, was already doing calculations in her head. An aerospace systems engineer by trade, she recognized the engine pitch drop, the erratic roll. Something had failed catastrophically. In the cockpit, Eric fought to stabilize the aircraft. His sandy hair stuck to his forehead with sweat. His training hadn't fully prepared him for solo handling of a mid-air systems failure in worsening weather. An alert flashed. "Captain unresponsive. Assume command." He tapped the headset. "Mayday, mayday, Axiom 394, Captain unconscious, systems failing, descending rapidly, location." But then the static overwhelmed him. Radio failure. Back in the cabin, Lila unbuckled slightly and peered toward the cockpit door. "Mommy," she whispered, "I think I can help." Hannah looked at her daughter, the same 6-year-old who spent nights memorizing the function of every dial in their garage simulator. "Lila, this isn't a game." "I know," she said calmly. "It's real, and I can help him land it." Eric was losing control. The instruments flashed warnings in red. The storm outside was closing in fast, wind shear pulling the aircraft off its flight path. He looked at the captain, still unconscious, then at the locked cockpit door behind him. Alone, trapped in a steel bullet hurtling downward. Meanwhile, in the cabin, Hannah made a split-second decision no mother would make lightly. She unbuckled, grabbed her daughter's hand, and pushed the call button repeatedly. A flight attendant stumbled over. Her face was flushed, strands of blonde hair falling from her bun. "Ma'am, please sit." "I'm a certified aerospace engineer," Hannah said quickly. "My daughter has flight simulator training, very advanced. The co-pilot is alone. We need access to the cockpit, now." The attendant blinked. "She's 6. I know how to start the auxiliary generator," Lila added matter-of-factly. "If his systems are down, I can help. Please." In that moment, time paused. Trust a mother with a calm child during an air crisis, or risk everything by refusing? The attendant hesitated, then keyed into the intercom. Seconds later, the cockpit door buzzed open. Eric turned and nearly fell out of his seat when he saw Hannah and little Lila entering. "What the hell? I'm here to help," Lila said, climbing onto the jump seat. "Let's start with stabilizing pitch." Eric blinked in disbelief, and yet he nodded. Eric, still seated in the pilot's chair, watched as 6-year-old Lila Foster, in her pink dinosaur hoodie and oversized headset, adjusted her posture like a seasoned co-pilot. Her small hands rested on the auxiliary panel. The storm raged outside, rain slamming the windows. The altimeter continued ticking downward. Hannah Foster stood just behind her daughter, monitoring everything. Her 35-year-old face carried the expression of a mother fighting two battles, the fear of what might happen and the awe of what her child was doing. Eric looked to Lila and asked, "What do you suggest?" The girl didn't even hesitate. "Your nose down too far. Pull up gently or you'll stall. Throttle back by 10%. Eric obeyed without sarcasm. The plane stopped dropping so violently. "How do you know that?" he asked, mouth dry. "I've practiced it, a lot." She began issuing small, simple commands, resetting the autopilot, rebalancing the rudder trim, and even toggling the secondary electrical system, exactly as she had with her mother in the simulator garage back home. The aircraft began leveling out. Outside, the storm still loomed, but inside, something had shifted. The panic began to ease, not because the danger had passed, but because a new sense of control had arrived. It had arrived in the form of a 6-year-old girl with steady hands and sharper instincts than most trained adults, and Eric Dawson, the once doubtful co-pilot with sandy hair and sea-green eyes, began to believe. The aircraft sliced through a burst of wind shear so violent that overhead bins popped again, and more screams echoed from the back. Still, the nose held steady now, thanks to small but significant corrections from Lila Foster, entirely focused. Co-pilot Eric Dawson's eyes flicked between her and the instruments. "We need to bypass the storm cell ahead," Lila nodded. 20 degrees right. Get out of the spiral path." Eric adjusted, hands firm. "Got it." Hannah Foster, intelligent, fiercely composed, watched from behind. She could hardly breathe. This was the simulator come to life, only worse. But her daughter, her tiny, brilliant daughter, wasn't blinking. She was in flow. Below them, mountains approached, radio still dead, navigation unreliable. Eric glanced back. "What else have you practiced?" "Emergency landings," Lila said. "Runway, grass, or water, all three." Eric almost laughed, but it came out a cough of disbelief. Lila turned to him, her young voice calm. "We can land this, but we need to find a flat path soon." Outside, the clouds were breaking slightly. A valley appeared beneath the aircraft, a rare stretch of flatland with an abandoned airstrip. A single silver line carved into green. Eric and Lila locked eyes. "That's our target," he said. She smiled. "Then let's bring it home." The valley below stretched like a forgotten path from another era. The derelict runway, a ghostly remnant of an old military base, lay half covered by moss and time. But it was long, straight, and open. In this moment, it was everything they needed. Eric Dawson, now damp from stress, nodded at the sight. "That's our only shot." Lila Foster, with focus, leaned forward in her oversized headset. Her pink dinosaur hoodie was soaked with sweat at the collar, but her grip on the controls remained steady. Her mother, Hannah Foster, stood frozen behind her, equal parts terrified and amazed. "I need flaps at 15, Lila said. Eric hesitated, then obeyed. He was following the lead of a 6-year-old. And somehow it felt right. Together, they monitored the descent rate, manually controlling throttle and angle. The aircraft bucked against turbulence, but they were no longer falling. They were flying low, steady, and with purpose. Back in the cabin, chaos had quieted. Word had spread that a child was assisting in the cockpit. Some passengers wept in fear, others prayed. A flight attendant whispered, "She's doing it. The little girl is helping him fly." Eric reached over and adjusted their pitch trim. "You're really something, kid." Lila gave a small grin. "Just don't crash." For the first time in an hour, he laughed. It was a strange alliance. An adult pilot broken by pressure and a child raised in simulation. But together, they were something no manual could define: hope. As the aircraft approached 1,500 feet above ground level, Eric glanced at Lila. Her small face, olive-toned and framed by damp curls, was utterly composed. Her hazel eyes locked on the artificial horizon, steady as a seasoned pilot. Her pink dinosaur hoodie's sleeves were slightly rolled, revealing trembling arms, yet her hands never shook. "Talk me through it," Eric said, voice rough. Lila responded like a checklist. "Reduce speed to 145 knots. Keep nose 2 degrees up. Flaps to full at 700 feet. Eric followed her commands. Behind them, Hannah's heart pounded. The 35-year-old mother, known for her analytical mind and cool judgment, now stood helpless in the cabin doorway. Her daughter, her only child, was doing what even she had never dared to imagine. Suddenly, a gust slammed the aircraft from the left. Lila reached forward instinctively. Counter with right rudder. Now, Eric did as she said. The plane wobbled, then corrected. The mountain wind howled outside. Hannah whispered to herself, "You can do this, baby." Lila didn't look back. Landing gear down, we're almost there. The ground grew closer. The shadow of the aircraft stretched across the grass before the runway. Inside the cabin, silence settled over the passengers. Tears mixed with awe. In that moment, cameras and headlines didn't exist. There was only a woman who had once built a simulator in her garage, a frightened co-pilot rediscovering his courage, and a child who refused to let fear win. Altitude 500 feet. The derelict airstrip loomed ahead, the edges crumbling, paint nearly gone. But it was straight. It was solid. Co-pilot Eric Dawson adjusted their trajectory. Hands calm now because Lila was calm, called out, "Hold heading, reduce throttle, ease down." Eric, exhausted, did exactly as instructed. Hannah Foster gripped the back of his chair. Her body trembled, but her mind replayed every simulator session she'd done with her daughter, every emergency drill, every mocked-up crisis. Lila had always taken it seriously, but this was something else. 30 feet, Lila announced. The wheels screeched against the cracked pavement. For a moment the plane bounced, then settled. Eric hit the brakes hard. The fuselage shook violently. Old tires felt the weight of the aircraft. The rear cabin jolted, overhead bins spilling open. Screams rang out, but then silence. The plane slowed, slower, stopped. For one full second no one spoke, no one moved. Then applause erupted. A roar of claps, tears, and disbelief swept through the aircraft. Flight attendants wept openly. Eric turned to Lila. She was still sitting tall in the jump seat, breathing deeply. Her hazel eyes flicked over every dial. Her tiny hand reached up and flipped the engines to idle. "You did it," he whispered. Lila smiled. "We did it." Outside, rescue teams scrambled toward the aircraft. News spread like wildfire. Flight Axiom 394 down safely in an abandoned airfield, all lives saved. Inside the cockpit, Eric Dawson sat quietly, hands resting on his lap. His sandy hair clung to his forehead, but his sea-green eyes, for the first time in years, showed pride. Lila Foster stepped down from the jump seat. Her pink dinosaur hoodie was stained with sweat and fear, but her steps were firm. She turned to Eric, still holding her stuffed monkey. "Can I have ice cream now?" Eric laughed, a real, full laugh. "You've earned every flavor they've got." Hannah Foster crouched and pulled her daughter into her arms. She was once tense with fear, melted with relief. Her olive-toned cheeks were wet with tears. "You were brilliant," she whispered. "Absolutely brilliant." Emergency personnel finally boarded the plane. Paramedics rushed to Captain Harrington, who remained unconscious but stable. Media crews circled the field, desperate for answers. When officials asked who had helped save the aircraft, Eric simply said, "A little girl and her mom." As they disembarked, reporters swarmed, microphones pushed toward Lila. "What's your name? How did you know what to do? Are you a prodigy?" Lila blinked at them and said, "I'm Lila. I just practiced a lot, with Mommy." It wasn't the miracle they expected, it was something even better. Within hours of the emergency landing, Flight Axiom 394 became a global headline. News outlets dubbed it the miracle in the valley. But once the shock wore off, the scrutiny began. Outside the emergency shelter where passengers were recovering, cameras and microphones crowded every step. Hannah Foster tried to shield her daughter from the press. "No interviews," she told the reporters. But the world wanted Lila, the 6-year-old who had helped land a plane while wearing a pink dinosaur hoodie, her hazel eyes and calm demeanor captivating every viewer. Co-pilot Eric Dawson, exhausted but steady, stood beside them during the press conference. "She knew exactly what to do," he said firmly. "She kept me calm. I would have lost control without her." That statement, intended to praise, only deepened the frenzy. News segments questioned parental choices. Psychologists debated the ethics of training a child in simulated aviation. Talk shows dissected Hannah's parenting methods. "She's just a child," some critics argued. "She saved over 170 lives," others fired back. Hannah's phone buzzed constantly. Requests for interviews, job offers, lawsuits, parenting forums, investigations. She held Lila close and whispered, "I didn't train you for fame. I trained you so you'd never feel helpless." Lila nodded but looked at Eric. "Are we in trouble?" He knelt beside her. "No, sweetheart. You're not in trouble. You're a hero. That makes some people uncomfortable." And with that, the storm began to turn inward. The aftermath brought more than media chaos. Emotionally, the trio, Eric, Hannah, and Lila, were all navigating new territory. At a government debriefing room days later, Hannah wore her usual no-nonsense attire. Gray blazer, dark jeans, hair pinned up, face looked more tired now, but still defiant. Across from her sat 3 aviation officials. One reviewed flight logs, another skimmed interviews. A third finally looked up. "You trained your daughter to operate a full cockpit simulator?" "Yes," Hannah answered, unflinching. "Under supervision, for learning, not for emergencies." "She acted decisively," the official admitted. "But there are questions of safety protocols," Eric, who had been invited to the session as a witness, interrupted. "If she hadn't been there, we'd be having a very different conversation." Later, outside the building, Hannah slumped against the wall. Eric approached, tie loosened, sleeves rolled. His sea-green eyes searched hers. "You okay?" She nodded. "Tired, angry, proud, all of it. I think she saved both of us," he said softly. Hannah looked up. "Yeah, I think she did." Inside the hotel where they were temporarily staying, Lila played with paper planes in the corner, humming to herself. Her stuffed monkey sat on the window ledge facing the clouds. She didn't know how the world saw her. She only knew that when the sky turned dangerous she had known what to do, and that was enough for now. As the public frenzy slowly cooled, Hannah made a difficult choice: to return to their quiet home in Southfield, a suburb far from the spotlight. The garage still held the simulator. The same hand-built cockpit with worn buttons and cracked vinyl seats. The same space where mother and daughter spent late evenings exploring hypothetical skies. Eric visited a week later. He wore casual jeans, a light jacket, and brought Lila a small gift, an old pair of pilot wings once given to him as a child. "For you," he said, handing them to her. Lila, 6 years old, with wide hazel eyes and olive-toned cheeks, pinned them proudly to her hoodie. "Does this make me a real pilot?" Eric smiled. "You already were." Hannah, watching from the doorway, felt something stir in her. Not romance, not yet, but respect. A shared experience few others could understand. They had faced death together, and survived because of a child. That had to mean something. In the weeks that followed, the three met more often, sometimes for debriefings, sometimes just for walks in the park. Eric taught Lila a few new things. Hannah corrected him with a smirk whenever he got something wrong. And slowly they stopped being strangers bound by tragedy. They started becoming a team. Fall arrived, coating Southfield in amber and rust-colored leaves. Lila returned to school, where classmates whispered her name and pointed with reverence. Some teachers called her special. Others kept their distance, unsure what to make of a 6-year-old who could land a plane. But Lila remained herself, quiet, focused, slightly quirky. Her pink hoodie was eventually replaced with a new one, navy blue with embroidered wings. Hannah resumed consulting work from home. The media calls had finally stopped, but the ache remained, of being questioned for doing what she believed was right. Eric took a temporary leave from flying. Something inside him had shifted. The panic attacks, the second-guessing, they had begun before the flight, but now he wanted to recenter. He started building models again, something he hadn't done since he was a kid. One afternoon, he invited Hannah and Lila over for dinner. It was simple: spaghetti, salad, and lemon pie. Afterward, Lila sat on the floor building a plane from foam board with Eric, while Hannah watched from the couch. "You know," she said softly, "I never expected any of this." Eric nodded. "Same here." She looked at him. "But I'm glad it was you in that cockpit." He met her eyes. "Me too," and for a moment there was peace. Winter crept into Southfield. One evening a knock came at Hannah's door. Eric stood there, cheeks pink from the cold, holding a folder. "I've been offered a captain slot in another airline," he said. "It's a good one, but it's out west." Hannah blinked. "Wow, that's huge." "Yeah," he shifted. "But I haven't decided yet." "Why not?" she asked, though she already sensed the answer. Eric looked down the hall to where Lila was working on a drawing. Airplanes again. "Because this," he said, "feels more real than anything up there." She said nothing, just looked at him with tired eyes full of understanding. "I don't want to just disappear from her life," he added. "You don't have to," and that was it. No declarations, no promises, just a quiet understanding that they had found something more important than career milestones. They had found each other, not because they planned to, but because life, chaotic, terrifying, miraculous life, had brought them together. On the 1-year anniversary of the landing, the three returned to the old simulator in the garage. Lila, now 7, a little taller but still sharp-eyed and steady, sat in the pilot's seat. Her blue hoodie had patches on the sleeves now, a little heart, a small plane, and a stitched lightning bolt. Eric adjusted the controls. "Okay, Captain, ready to fly?" Lila grinned. "Always." Hannah, notebook in hand, took notes. Altitude steady, no turbulence forecasted. The session wasn't about training anymore. It was a celebration. The simulator beeped as Lila made corrections. "Do you think I'll fly real planes someday?" "You already have," Eric replied. "No," she said, "on purpose." They all laughed. But Hannah smiled in that quiet, knowing way only a mother can. "When you're older. But yes, if you still want it, I'll make sure of it." And so, the simulator that once prepared a little girl for an impossible crisis now gave her something even greater. hope for a future she could reach. The world eventually moved on. Other headlines took over, other stories dominated the cycle. But in Southfield one bond only grew stronger. Eric stayed, not because he had to, but because he chose to. He became a presence in Lila's life. Uncle Eric, she called him sometimes, mentor, friend. For Hannah he became someone to lean on, someone who understood her silence. They shared family dinners, mini vacations, long conversations about parenting, science, fear, and healing. It wasn't a fairy tale. There were arguments, bad days, lingering trauma, but there was love too, not loud and dramatic, but real. And Lila, she thrived. No longer just the girl who landed a plane. She became Lila Foster, aspiring pilot, model builder, and the best paper plane champion in her second-grade class. The bond between the three wasn't defined by biology. It was built on survival, on trust forged at 30,000 feet. Eric never tried to replace anyone in Lila's life. Instead, he stood beside her as she grew, steady as a co-pilot. And Hannah, once fiercely independent, began letting him in. Together, they became something unexpected, a family, not perfect, but real. And when people asked Lila what family meant, she'd say, people who never let you fall, even if you're falling out of the sky. A year and a half after the incident, a journalist from a respected aviation magazine sat down with the trio. The final question was simple. If you could go back and change anything, would you? Eric answered first. I would have trained harder, prepared better. But I wouldn't change how it ended. Hannah added, I might have protected her from the world's reaction more. But I wouldn't take back the trust we built. Lila, now 7.5, thought hard, then said, no, because that's how I got Uncle Eric, and Mommy smiles more now. That was the quote that went viral again. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was true. Years later, Lila Foster would take her first solo flight at age 16. Her co-pilot badge, gifted to her by Eric, was pinned to her jacket. Her simulator still lived in the garage, lovingly maintained. And the memory of that stormy day in the sky stayed with her, not as a nightmare, but as a foundation. Of courage, of trust, of love. As the wheels lifted off the runway, Hannah watched from the ground, tears in her eyes. Eric stood beside her, hand resting gently on her shoulder. She's ready, he said. Hannah nodded. She always was. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring tales of courage, family, and the extraordinary strength that lives in the most unexpected people.